The media. It's everywhere. You can't escape it. Most human beings are rarely more than a few clicks away from another terrible article or video. Because of this, digital media has now become a multi-billion industry. It was, for a time, unstoppable. But bubbling just under the surface of this enormous growth was something sinister. Unspeakable actions. Horrors only the most depraved could fathom. What is that? The list goes on. These desperate attempts to gain attention from the youth aren't anomalies either. In fact, if anything, even more companies have jumped on board. Vice has been seen as the sort of pioneer of these practices for over a decade now, constantly pushing the envelopes to what they can monetize and gaining such a reputation from it. Posts all over the internet are calling them out. Various subreddits, countless journalists and media teams alike have been calling out Vice for years.
Media is in shambles. The millennial media empire built its brand with edgy, investigative news, finger-on-the-pulse music coverage, and Emmy Award-winning series. In the 2010s, Vice Media was supposed to be the brand.
But believe it or not, there was a time when Vice wasn't just talking about different ways of smoking pot from an apple. Vice became what it is today gradually. The story of Vice is a warning. It's an example of how all beautiful things eventually become sour. It's the mid-90s, and magazines are the biggest they've ever been. In 1994, Shane Smith, Cyrus Alvey, and Gavin McInnes decide they want a piece of the pie and establish a media company called The Voice of Montreal, then later changing the name to Vice. The founding philosophy of the company is simple: provide a definitive guide to an uncertain world, treat journalism like art, and the journalists like artists. Vice goes on to uncover the underground scene. Politics, hookers, and drugs, not from the point of view of concerned authority figures, but as enthusiastic consumers. And yet, Vice is struggling. They're begging any skate shop around to store their free magazine. It gets so bad they have to lie to advertisers about their viewership. The plan being that by the time the advertisers find out, their audience will be too big for it to matter. It's a serious risk. If they get caught, they will be sued. However, it pays off. In 1999, they finally break through, snatching an investment of $4 million. In the very same year, they move off to New York and spread their wings worldwide. But lurking in the shadows of their success is a fierce rival watching. In 2004, Al Gore and his partners buy a cable news channel and rename it to Current TV. They intend to challenge Vice, creating a youth-orientated network with audience-submitted content. The company, however, failed to find an audience, blew an IPO in 2009 and closed in 2013, with its remains being purchased by Al Jazeera. Meanwhile, Vice's audience is growing rapidly. Vice publishes articles and videos captured by young punk correspondents in conflict zones all around the world, all while mainstream media reports on stories from the Hilton. The youth had spoken and Vice had defeated Current TV, and Vice was now a growing threat towards mainstream media. Over the next decade, Vice makes a nice return on investment, funding talented journalists to produce pieces like Hamilton's Pharmacopoeia and the Vice Guide to Travel. However, by 2008, some creative differences are starting to grow. Co-founder Gavin McInnes leaves the company for good, going on to his next venture, the Proud Boys. In a 2013 interview with The New Yorker, Gavin said his split with Vice was about the increasing influence of corporate advertising on Vice's content, stating that marketing and editorial being enemies had been the business plan. Then, not long after, insiders at Vice leaked information of Vice altering shots during the editing process. Notably in a 2011 documentary on Libya, where a voiceover from Shane Smith claimed that he had gone to the front lines amidst an offensive whilst insiders claimed he didn't even make the trip. But it doesn't make a difference. Vice continues growing its enormous YouTube channel, releasing films like the UK's Scariest Debt Collector, The World's Scariest Drug, and Inside the Superhuman World of the Iceman. Along the way, Shane regularly mocks traditional media companies as stodgy and uncreative. Things are going great by this point, and media moguls are noticing. In 2013, the devil himself, Rupert Murdoch, decides to invest $70 million into the company. And with this news coming out, founder Shane Smith was quick to state that this would not impact the company's content. This is when Vice starts to get a bit of a reputation for their increasingly clickbaity and hollowed-out content. But this would be a small taste of things to come. It's the new year of 2015. Shane Smith enjoyed an epic run of the blackjack tables in Las Vegas, spending $300,000 of his $1 million winnings on dinner and booze. It was a heady moment to be gambling in and on digital media. BuzzFeed and Vox, like Vice, were rapidly accumulating young audiences coveted by advertisers, with investors valuing them at $1.7 billion and $1 billion respectively. And by 2017, Shane was now charming Fox, Disney, and TPG, a private equity firm, into investing a combined $1.4 billion into Vice, valuing the company at $5.7 billion. Vice was untouchable, or so it seemed. In 2017, Vice has a little bit of a problem. Not only are they getting a reputation for spewing out half-baked journalism, but they are also bringing in hundreds of millions a year and still managing to lose money. Something has to change. By this point, it's clear which direction the company is headed. So Vice is faced with two options. The first option, going back to the roots of ballsy gonzo journalism. The second option, generate lazy, mass-produced content in a last-ditch effort to get clicks. I think we all know what Murdoch and Disney thought would be best. So Vice continues to write article after article about having sex with bugs, anal sex, and drinking vaginal juice, all while claiming to be a reputable news source. And guess what? It became Shane Smith's nightmare. A stodgy and uncreative media company. A counterculture media company stripped of its originality. So Shane stepped down as CEO with Nancy DeBug taking over. It was the end of an era, and Vice continued marching on the path of least resistance, unfazed by the masses of hate they received on a daily basis. And what seems like a never-ending mission to bankruptcy, Vice then lost its primetime HBO show and one of its top executives. By now, its average viewership is 550,000. Bear in mind, we're talking about a multi-billing company with the backing of Disney and Fox struggling to get the viewership of YouTubers. Then in 2020, things were happening in China. They weren't good. A new virus was springing up all over Wuhan and it was spreading fast. China locked down the city and told everyone that everything was just fine. Turns out it wasn't. Fast forward a few months and almost the entire world has it, and it's still spreading. After infections start springing up in Europe and America, governments then locked down. It was one of the final nails in Pfizer's coffin, stripping them of another 150 jobs. The days of getting drunk in North Korean labor camps were over. Vice sold its soul and originality for a crumb of approval from the big-name conglomerates, and they failed to do that too. Disney and other shareholders later claimed their investments in Vice were completely worthless. Vice has failed to turn a profit since. But you may be asking, what makes Vice worse than all the other digital media companies? Well, Vice for many years was a thrust of change and progress. Vice was at the tip of a great counterculture iceberg, drifting in the sea lanes of a culturally homogenized world, traveling to the peripheries of extremist nations Iran, Pakistan, and North Korea, not only traveling to the edges of the world, but also the terrifying peripheries of human consciousness. But today, Vice represents a generation pointlessly obsessing over cookie-cutter opinions and faux individuality. Vice now serves as a soft-so advert for sanitized opinions and a sanitized culture. Vice had a chance to be a beacon of light, but now the light has vanished.